Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. I've just got home after doing Ange Postecoglou's latest press conference at the Tottenham Hotspur training ground, previewing the Southampton game on Sunday. It was the morning after the Chelsea game, which was unfortunately Spurs' 16th league defeat of the season, 1-0 defeat, courtesy of an Enzo Fernandez header. I did a review of that game and the major talking point from it already, so go check out that video. Probably listen to it rather than watch it, because I was very late at night in the car. It's very dark, and someone told me I look like Tom Barclay, which was very much appreciated from that video. But in that video, obviously, I address the major talking point where Ange, after making a double substitution, where he brought on Papsar for Lucas Bergvall, he was then taunted with chants of "you don't know what you're doing," which we haven't heard before from the Spurs fans towards Postecoglou, and then seemingly scores an equaliser, which was then later ruled out by VAR for a foul. But before that happened, Ange seemed to cup his ear towards the away fans, seemingly suggesting, what have you got to say now, seeing as the substitution worked. He then later, when we asked him about it, and I specifically asked him about it in the press conference, denied it was him trying to sort of wind up the fans at all. It was him just wanting to get the fans excited and hear some encouragement after that goal, because he thought it was a key moment in the game. And that was an interesting moment. I'm not sure a lot of Spurs fans were having that as his reasoning behind it, but that was the story he went with. That's what he said was the intention behind it. And that cropped up again in today's press conference. And he did, in the open section, I may do a video on the embargo section because there's loads of interesting stuff in that as well. We'll see if I've got time. But he did admit he made a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake over his reaction on that front. He said his mistake was celebrating the goal in the first place. And he went on to this another really long rant about VAR and how he feels like he's a lone wolf, so to speak, on dissenting against VAR and where it's at the moment. He feels like it's ruining the game, as he said last night after the Chelsea game was killing the game. He really feels like it's changed football a lot. He talked a bit about falling out of love with football as a result of things like VAR, specifically VAR, where they're having to wait around for so long, and he felt that the mistake he made was celebrating the goal in the first place. He shouldn't have got his hopes up, I suppose, and there's definitely some truth in that. Personally, VAR, the way that you have to wait for so long for goals to be confirmed and then celebrate again, or it takes the spontaneity out of football. That's my personal opinion, and it's obviously Ange's as well, but that's what he was saying about that. He wasn't saying he made a mistake with this particular reaction. He didn't sort of change his mind on that. He did sort of address the criticism he's been getting from the fans, and he said what he's consistently said throughout his time here, whether you like him or his recent interactions with fans at all, is kind of besides the point. He's always said fans are free to think and feel whatever they want, really, and express their feelings in the way that they feel they should be able to, seeing as they're the ones that pay their money. And that message was consistent and continued again today. He said that he understands the criticism of him, seeing as he's responsible for it all, but he thinks having a go at the players. So remember Maddison afterwards spoke about how he went over to the fans afterwards and understands how they're angry, but says it was difficult to receive pelters when you're over there. And he was sort of put to Ange, and he said that he feels like the players are fighting tooth and nail and giving everything, so he thinks it's a bit unfair to sort of criticise the players, really. Just back to the VAR rant, he sort of made this interesting analogy about phones. He picked up his phone and he was saying that it's a similar thing with phones, in the way that we now as a society are sort of trying to put the genie back in the bottle over how dangerous he feels, and personally I feel phones can be, particularly as a parent now. But the horse has bolted, in his opinion, and it's the same with VAR, really. And like I said, he feels like it's quite sad, really. He was talking about falling out of love with football, and that if one day he's not a manager anymore, he'll probably have to find a new hobby and not watch as much, which is it'd be interesting to see how much that resonates with other fans. Obviously, I suppose a lot of Spurs fans don't really want to hear that kind of rhetoric right now, or that kind of talk right now, because it's all about results and the Europa League rather than that side of things. But I do also feel maybe this is why Ange particularly relates, or why people, I think, fans from wider football sort of appreciate him, or he sort of has more of an impact than your average manager, because he says things that I think a lot of people can relate to. And that would be another example of it. But anyway, it was specifically asked about the Bergvall sub, because obviously that's the thing that sparked those chants, I think, from the fans of you don't know what you're doing. And he said he's obviously playing really well this season, but he said he didn't look himself physically. And in terms of running power, they needed energy, and Sarr brought that to the game. Obviously it's Southampton at the weekend, and I'll come on to my thoughts on them at the moment. But he was asked about sort of team selection and any sort of fitness updates. So Van de Ven, he said, just came off with cramp, which was to be expected, but he's fine. He was asked about potentially playing Archie Gray in midfield, which we've been waiting to see for a very long time. This season he finally played in holding midfield, started the game in holding midfield against Fulham. I can't say I was blown away by his performance, to be honest. But he's obviously only a teenager, and you do wonder if from now until the end of the season he might get more of a run in that position. But based on Ange's answer, I'm not so sure. He said he basically said the focus is all on winning games of football at the moment, and I think we're past the point of looking to develop players right now, which I was interested by that answer, really. I mean, obviously Gray's been involved a lot throughout the season. A lot of it's been through needs must, playing at centre-back. But given that he's a big money signing, really, and has proven his commitment, and he is a player that can be relied upon when he's played at centre-back, you would have thought he would get more of a chance at holding midfielder. But the fact that Ange sort of doesn't see him, talked about, it's not about developing players right now, makes me think maybe it won't happen. That was interesting. He did say he's going to rotate a little bit. A couple of changes, not too many, he said. I think he wants to keep this sort of mix, not completely changing a whole team. To be honest, he did a lot, I think, at the Fulham game, didn't he? Made a lot of changes in that game, maybe unnecessarily so, ahead of an international break. So you probably can't expect too many of them. So we'll come into we'll come back into team lineup at the end, as I always wrap up with that. And then finally he was asked about the protest that's coming on Sunday. It's obviously a lot of disharmony amongst the ranks, as we know. A lot of we already saw the protest ahead of I forget which game it was a while ago, but with the massive fans. It was Man United, wasn't it? Massive march outside. Wonderful to see something similar. And he was asked by my friend George Sessions at PA about, whether he worried about how toxic it might get, given that even though Change for Tottenham, who are the organisers behind this protest march, have sort of said once again that it's about, this protest, it's about, backing the boys, the team, during the actual match. Will that be the case? Could it be that there could be a sort of toxic atmosphere that could affect the performance of the team? Ange basically said he hoped that wouldn't be the case. He's hoping that fans will be very much behind the team for the game, and then obviously on Thursday night for their huge game of the season at home to Eintracht Frankfurt, which their season obviously hinges on. And that was most of it from the broadcast, I have to say. So on to Southampton. I mean, suddenly this looks like a banana skin that I was not expecting. I mean, Southampton are really poor, so it really shouldn't be. But hey, they lost at home to Ipswich. They lost at home to Leicester. Both of those teams, let's be honest, are getting relegated this season. Southampton are definitely getting relegated. I mean, could Spurs somehow have the worst hat-trick possible by losing at home to all the teams that get relegated? I don't think so, but Southampton actually, weirdly, in their own, for their level this season, which has been obviously dreadful, seem to have picked up a little bit of late. I mean, they were very unlucky not to get 3 points against Crystal Palace last time out. Last minute equaliser from Palace's point of view for a draw. Liverpool, they took the lead. They ended up losing 3-1 away at Anfield, but they have shown sort of moments like at Man United away that they're not a terrible team despite the points ratio or points return that they've got this season. Having said that, this is a team that's on 10 points after 30 games, 8 games to go. They still need another point just to match the worst ever record, which was Derby back in the 2007-2008 season. So your Spurs really have to be beating them at home. They just have to. Even with the league season completely gone from Spurs' perspective, you really would worry if suddenly the whole atmosphere gets toxic, if suddenly Southampton somehow pull off a result at Spurs, then, question marks really would be there around the manager, even ahead of the Frankfurt game, which would be really concerning. So Spurs need to make sure they avoid that massive banana skin. Ivan Juric, who's the Southampton manager, in case you didn't know that, seems they've changed manager of the season from Russell Martin, off the back of last time Spurs played them when they won 5-0. I remember being down at St Mary's. They won 5-0 Spurs in what was quite a big game really for Ange and a really convincing performance. Russell Martin comes into the press conference afterwards, fronts up to be fair, but he knows probably the game's up. And within an hour of full time, on that, I was making my way back to driving home actually, maybe even less, about an hour, he'd been sacked already. So that was the end of him. And Ivan Juric, who was Roma manager earlier, this Croatian manager who hasn't really made much of an impact, is the manager now, and he's challenged his team to make sure they're not the worst ever Premier League team, basically, to beat that Derby, awful points haul of 11 points. So there is something on the line from their perspective. But Spurs, they really, really need to be winning this game. I mean, it just doesn't really bear thinking about, to be honest, if they somehow lost at home to Southampton. Anyway, let's wrap it up with the team. As Ange just said, a couple of changes, not too many. So based on that, I think Vicario in goal. I think Porro comes back in because obviously he didn't start against Chelsea. Romero, I imagine, stays in. Then you think maybe Van der Ven might get a break if he came off with cramp. Make sure he's completely ready for Frankfurt. So between Davis and Gray, really, coming in for that centre-back spot. Seeing as Danzo's still injured. Toss up between Spence and Udogie. Maybe Spence goes back to left-back. I don't think Basuma's going to start. Just feel like he's out of the picture at the moment. But I guess there's an opportunity for that to happen. So I would reckon if he's not going to make too many changes, I think he might stick with Bentancur, Bergvall, maybe give Maddison a rest and bring Sarr back in. But perhaps Maddison starts against Southampton, I don't know. That's a tough one. And then I wonder if Sonny gets a rest. Wasn't really made that much of an impact at Chelsea. Maybe Johnson, Solanke, Odegaard back to the left. Might not be the worst decision, seeing as if they're against Frankfurt, it's not working with Son. Then maybe having Odegaard sort of get some time on the left-hand side as well as the right. Gives him a few more options going into the game. So that's the team that I reckon he will probably go with. Anyway, let me know your lineups, your fears, I suppose, ahead of Southampton. What you think the atmosphere is going to be like regarding the protest. What this means for Ange ahead of obviously a massive week with Frankfurt. What you make of his points today, particularly off the back of the flashpoint against Chelsea, and I suppose where you think he's at in terms of being able to win over the fans again, if that's even possible. Can there be a restoring, a mending of the frayed relationship there is between supporters and the manager at this point? Obviously, I've seen a lot of the comments of the last video. I feel like quite a few will say no, but then again, one of the things I like, what I've enjoyed about this channel, is how balanced and fair quite a lot and very articulate a lot of the responses have been that I get on completely different, I find, to Twitter, which can be obviously the brevity of it means that people get to the point way too often way too quickly and can be very blunt and not very nice. On here, obviously, you've got as much space as you want, but there's some really interesting points being made. As I've said many times before, it makes me think differently about Spurs, makes me consider other things. I don't know everything at all. It makes me think about other ideas, but I also feel a lot of people on here are very, very fair towards Ange, and even with that, I think there's been a lot of people sort of now starting to wonder if he's still the right man. And if that's the case, then that probably is bad news from his perspective. But anyway, let me know your thoughts, and I will speak to you again. Hopefully maybe do another video about the embargo section. I'll see if I can get that out now. Cheers, guys.